Hello, how are you doing? I have a big pile of really interesting sounding new books that I'm eager to read, so I'm going to discuss all of these titles individually, and I'd love to know if you're also keen on reading any of these books, or if you have read any of them, please let me know your thoughts about them. But before I get into talking about this great stack of books, I want to talk about a wonderful bookshop experience that I got to have recently, because a little over a year ago I made a video where I had found this article about the most beautiful bookshops in the world. So I made this fun resolution that I want to visit some of these beautiful bookshops, and when I was on holiday recently I finally got to visit one in Venice called Libreria Aqua Alta, and this is a really old bookshop that's full of really old books, and it's kind of a cavernous space that's set on the canal. There's this opening in the side where it's kind of you can arrive by boat, although there's a gondola stationed there in which a lot of people pose for pictures, and it's one of the issues when you get labeled as one of the most beautiful bookshops in the world. Then you have lots of tourists descending on this space to take pictures there, and so a lot of, I think, the people that were there weren't necessarily readers or interested in browsing the books, and it's quite difficult to browse all the many stacks of books that they have there because there's so many people posing for pictures, and I mean, I was doing that as well, so I can't really talk down that experience because I really enjoyed capturing the experience. And they have these stations set up like the gondola in the doorway to the canal, but also this stack of books that had kind of meshed together in the flooding of the city, and so they set this path over this stack of books that you could walk through, and there was this old guy there that was kind of ushering people along, saying like, keep it moving, take your picture, but keep on moving. And you had to navigate these narrow spaces in between gondolas and bathtubs within the bookshop in order to look at all the stacks of books. And they keep books within these bathtubs and gondolas within the shop, because then when the water levels rise in Venice, then the books are protected. And so yeah, it was a really interesting experience visiting there, but it was also slightly chaotic, and yeah, it was a really beautiful space. And I did buy a book while I was there, so I found this copy of the Body of Jonah Boyd by David Leavitt while I was there. It cost €10.50, and so David Leavitt is an American author. I think I've read a novel of his before, or at least certainly some of his short stories before, and he's a really interesting author. And the story of this is, I think it's set in the late 60s, yeah, and it's about a Thanksgiving dinner where a whole assemblage of different people come together. Some of them are having secret affairs with each other, some of them have secrets of their own that they've been keeping, and when this novelist called Jonah Boyd joins the Thanksgiving party, some of these secrets come out into the open, and I love these stories about like American holiday occasions which kind of go awry and kind of explode as like secrets and disagreements and arguments occur between different people. So I think this will be a really enjoyable book to read. But also while I was there, they had these matchbooks of different films and different authors. So I got a little matchbook of Virginia Woolf just because I thought it was really random and fun. And I also got a Hut Priest's calendar. Now I have to stress, I bought this as like a joke gift for a friend of mine, which is why I've kept it in the shrink wrap. But you can see on the back, it featured in different months are different very sexy the holy men. So if that is your thing, then this is a calendar for you. So yeah, I just thought that was funny. But okay, I'll get into talking about some of these other books now. First up is The House of Doors by Twan N. And this novel is set in 1921 in Penang, where a well-to-do lawyer named Robert and his society hostess wife live, and an old friend of Robert's comes to visit them, and this turns out to be the author W. Somerset Maugham, and so we follow his life as he's kind of at his crisis point in his personal life, but also he's professionally a writer, and his experiences with this couple, especially with the wife, and how they relate secrets to each other. And this is a kind of like sub-genre of fiction that I absolutely love, of novels that are about novelists. And I've read lots of W. Somerset Maugham's short stories and some of his novels. I think he's a really excellent writer. Who was it that said like W. Somerset Maugham is the best of the second-rate writers, which is such a backhanded compliment, but yeah, I really adore his writing, his books that I have read and his stories that I have read. And also, this is a gorgeous look at the end papers of this hardback book. It's so beautiful, and I've also seen really great reviews for this novel. And also, interestingly, Twan N is currently a judge for the International Booker Prize, so it'll be really interesting to see if this novel is actually listed for this year's English language Booker Prize, because yeah, it'll be then he'll just be all over the Booker Prize, and he has been listed for the Booker Prize in the past, so it seems like a really good prospect. And you know, literary people love books about literary figures, so yeah, I am really keen to read this. And speaking of the International Booker Prize, as if I haven't been talking about it enough recently, but I loved reading this novel called At Dusk by Hwang Sok-Yong a few years ago when it was listed for the International Booker Prize. And now he has a new novel that's just been translated called Matter 210, which is about a worker in Seoul who's been laid off, and to protest this happening, he sits atop a factory chimney and stays there for a long period of time, during which he communes with his ancestors. And so this novel like looks at his story, but also goes back to previous generations of workers in South Korea, exploring their stories. And it's quite a big epic. It's almost 500 pages long, but sounds really good. Big Swiss by Jen Beagin. This is a novel about a woman in her mid-40s who types out transcripts of audio recordings from sex therapy sessions. And as she is recording one of these sessions of a client on a number of different occasions, she becomes slightly obsessed with the woman that she hears talking about her issues with this sex therapist. And she labels this woman Big Swiss because she's from Switzerland. And I just visited Switzerland recently, so that instantly drew me to this novel. But I think it's so they gradually form a connection with each other, I think, in a dog park, and form a relationship with each other. And so I think there's a slight comic tone to this story, which sounds really enjoyable, but also looking at issues to do with relationships and sexuality in a really intriguing way. Keeping on with the theme of novels about writers, there is The Lost Diary of Samuel Pepys by Jack Jewers. So Samuel Pepys is obviously famous for recording diaries in the 1600s about English society, and it was thought that he'd finished writing his diaries at the age of 36. But this novel takes the form of a historical thriller following Samuel Pepys' experiences going forward as he's caught in this conspiracy to do with spies and a whole secret society. So I think this just sounds so intriguing. The Sleeping Car Porter by Suzette Mayr, which is a novel that won the Giller Prize in Canada last year. And at the end of last year, I made a video about the prize-winning books of 2022. And someone commented in that video, like, why don't you talk about the Giller Prize? You never talk about the Giller Prize. And there's a section of that video where I do talk about the Giller Prize and this novel, which won that year. So that viewer obviously didn't watch the entire video, which I took much pleasure in pointing out to her. But part of why I hadn't read this book yet, because it hadn't been published in the UK yet, but it finally has now. And this novel does sound so intriguing. So it is about a sleeping car porter who is black and who is working on this train that crosses Canada, and the white passengers on this train call him George, even though that is not his name, but he has to kind of defer to them. So it's following his experiences with that, but also how he has these kind of hallucinatory experiences where he interacts with or he sees ghosts, but also is meditating on his relationship or infatuation with another man. So yeah, this sounds so good, and I've heard so many great things about it, and I'm really looking forward to reading this Giller Prize winner. Then there is the novel Salvage This World by Michael Farris Smith. This story is set in southern Mississippi during a time of economic depression. It's about a woman who becomes a zealot, that kind of taking advantage of people who are deprived and inciting them into violence, and but also about another woman who's a single mother that is on the run, who tries to return to her father's home only to find that he is missing. And it's about the confluence of the people in this community when something very dramatic occurs. A new novel with a very curious title is Ghost Girl Banana by Wharton. This is a story with a kind of dual narrative. On one side, there's a woman from the Far East who moves to London in the 1960s and starts a new life here. But then there's also a story set in the 1990s following the daughter of this woman who barely knew her mother, but unexpectedly gets an inheritance from a very influential Chinese stranger. So she travels to Hong Kong to investigate where this inheritance came from and looking at her past. The author Fiona Scarlett, who's a wonderful person, says of this book, it's a story of family, love, redemption, and belonging, told with such heart and empathy, essential and utterly unforgettable. Next, I have a couple of inventively told memoirs. So first is a book that I keep hearing a lot of great things about, which is Wish I Was Here by M. John Harrison, who is an author that's had a really interesting and varied career, writing in a number of different genres and styles, and is such an interesting literary author. And so this is a memoir or an anti-memoir where he looks back on his life almost as if it were a mystery. I'm not entirely sure what this story is, and from accounts of it's received a lot of praise from a number of different authors. Some of its readers don't even know how to describe it, including the author Jonathan Coe, who says of this book, I love this book, even if I don't know how to describe it. Is it a memoir? Is it a handbook for writers? As always with M. John Harrison, you're never quite sure what you're reading or where it will take you next. Is This Okay by Harriet Gibsone. This is subtitled One Woman's Search for Connection Online, because in this memoir she describes her experiences online throughout her life, obsessively searching a number of different topics, some of which she's quite ashamed about, so it's taking a slightly comic look at that, but also in her late 20s. She experienced early menopause, but also really wanted to become a mother. So it's about how her searches online in relation to this led her on a whole other path. It's meant to be quite comic as well as very moving. Then there is the novel Your Love Is Not Good by Johanna Hedva. This is a story of a Korean-American painter who falls in lust with a white model, and how this leads to a lot of exciting things, but also to that painter's kind of self-destruction. So it's following that story, and it says that it's infused with a queer and punky aesthetic. And I have to read to you the bio for the author, Johanna Hedva, because it's really intriguing. So it says, Hedva is a Korean-American writer, artist, musician, and astrologer who was raised in Los Angeles by a family of witches and now lives in LA and Berlin. So I had to look up this author online, and yeah, her picture is really interesting, and it made me all the more keen to read this book. The author, Matilda Bernstein Sycamore, who I just adore, says of this book, Your Love Is Not Good is a dazzling tale of claustrophobia and neglect. Johanna Hedva cracks open the art world to exorcise the pain of belonging. I also have some new collections of short stories, and first off, I'm keeping on with the witchy theme, because one of the short stories in this collection is about 3 teenagers who believe that they are witches, and I was really drawn to both the title and the cover of this book, called Because I Don't Know What You Mean and What You Don't by Josie Lawn, and it has a fox on the cover looking very sinister, obviously, and I love foxes, so yeah, that just really draws me to it. So yeah, these are stories about a whole range of subjects, but in the description it says, each tale paints a life in miniature and offers an escape chute from the mayhem of modern life. There's this vivid green on the inside of the cover. And also the actress Joanna Lumley says, her writing is miraculous, a dazzling debut. Then there is the collection Southerly by Argentinian writer George Consiglio, and this is published by Charco Press, who are such a wonderful publisher. I was really intrigued by the sound of this story, which it says, a man sets about renovating his childhood home and starts to feel that he might be rebuilding his own life in the process. It also says that George Consiglio presents a universe of tales linked by a certain rhythm in the prose or the subtle dimensions of violence and perversion. And there's a collection called Human Sacrifices by Maria Fernanda Ampuero, who is from Ecuador, and who has this very glamorous picture in the back of the book. So these are tales which sound quite sinister and intriguing. In one story, 2 girls suspect sinister behavior from the missionaries lodging in their home. The author Monica Ojeda says these are pure horror and aesthetic joy. Human Sacrifices is a magnificent book that still haunts me to this day. And finally, I have a new comic novel called The Chancellor by Fiona Graham. This is a story set in the late 80s about an Irishman who's seen as a disappointment to his family. So he wants to turn his life around. He moves to Hollywood wanting to become a famous actor, and there he meets a washed up actor who becomes his mentor. So I think this just sounds like a really fun book, and I really enjoy new Irish fiction. So those are all of the new titles I have. Like I said, let me know if you've read any of these books, or if you're interested in reading any of these books now. Please let me know about that in the comments below, or if you have visited any beautiful or really lovely bookshops that you want to recommend that I should take an excursion to and visit myself. Please let me know about that as well. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things and visiting good bookshops, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye bye.